Today we continue with the book of Ruth. Again, last week we saw two desolate widows making their way back after a very hopeless situation. Doors slammed shut on their faces. There is almost no hope for a future. Husbands dead. No one to carry forward the name of this family, of Elimelech. A family whose name was brilliant and hopeful. My God is king, Elimelech. You know, what do you do in those circumstances? In verse 19 of chapter 1, the book of Ruth, so the two of them, meaning Naomi and Ruth, went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" So there's something even about her physical appearance that has changed. They are not quite able to recognize her. Obviously, she's been away for a very long time. But beyond that, the ravages of having been in a foreign country, the grief that she has undergone, the long trip back to Bethlehem, everything, you know, speaks desolation. They are not able to recognize her. Is this Naomi? Then she responds to them. She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" And so we say there is value in being able to go unedited before God. And the issue that you have are with God, not with anybody else. So she doesn't blame anyone. She says, it's the Almighty that has done this for me, to me. And it's him who has testified against me. I went away full, now I'm coming back empty. The Lord has done this. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Again, we said a glimmer of hope is the barley harvest. Even though she says she's returning empty, it's like the coffers are waiting because God has filled his land with blessing, and there will be a harvest. And not just a physical harvest, even a spiritual harvest is waiting. And this is the way of dealing with God dealing with our people. He says that I will repay the years that the locusts have eaten. So even though you might look back and maybe you've had a streak of bad fortune for a long time, and you're looking back at the family history and you've said for the last decade, you know, there's been no prosperity in this home, there's been no marriage in this home, there's been businesses have failed, you know, and so on, and there's been a streak or a number of deaths, you know, God sends the years of refreshing. And he says that he is the one who repays the years that the locusts have eaten. And he's able to bring back even that which you thought was lost. So then, chapter 2 begins a kind of a different phase in the story of this family. Having responded, I guess, to a call from the inside to return to Bethlehem, the house of bread, God will begin a new work. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man. Worthy here speaks not just of his status in society, it also speaks of his character as a man. A man who is worthy is a man of standing, a man of integrity, most likely a man of grace and kindness, as we will see. So a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." Note, the situation hasn't changed. Now Ruth is even more disadvantaged. At least before, she was in Moab, home turf, because she's Moabite. She's now a foreigner in Israel, in Bethlehem, but she takes initiative. She just doesn't sit there and say, "Look, man, Nikubaya, now it's even slightly worse," because they haven't been in Israel for decades. So they have not planted, there is nothing for them waiting. So they are actually facing starvation if she doesn't do something about it. So the situation is slightly worse than before. Moab, they had a home, they had a place, all right? But they were bereaved. But here, they are homeless, you know? And so the situation is even worse. But she takes initiative. Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain. After him in whose sight I will find favor. She knows no one. So I'll just go, you know? And for me, this is what true faith is. And this is where divine favor meets human responsibility. That she's saying to herself, I will trust in this God of Naomi so much that I will step out there and see where the hand of God will guide me. She won't sit in the house and feel sorry for herself and for Naomi. What do we do? She doesn't even ask Naomi. And Naomi is a country woman here. She should be giving guidance. She says, let me go and glean, and see what we can gather. So there is hope. And this taking of initiative again tells us something about the character of Ruth. Though we know that God will bless her and do amazing things, there's something that she is doing at a personal level. Not just sitting and waiting for things to happen. She wakes up and says, let me go and glean. Now, gleaning is not an honorable job at all. Actually, it's just like begging, okay? But because the God of Israel is a gracious God, and he had sought equity within the community of Israel, gleaning had a law that governed it. And gleaning was a system that God has instituted in Israel to mitigate against extreme poverty or abject poverty. Just to make sure that there was dignity among people who could not earn a living because they didn't own any of the factors of production, maybe except labor. All right? They didn't have land, they didn't have any wealth of any kind. This would be classified as the vulnerable, the widow, the orphan, and the alien or the foreigner. These are the most vulnerable groups, susceptible to exploitation, and literally some of them, if some of these laws were not in place, they would literally starve. And here is one of the laws that governed gleaning. A bit of the heart of God about what we should do with the poor. Leviticus 19, verse 9 to 10. And this is what God commands. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. I wish some of those lessons would be learned by us as a people and also our leaders. Because we have enough in this country. We have enough. But we have become so selfish, and some people are hoarding for themselves millions and billions. For what? Well, fellow countrymen are going hungry. God's society is to be an equitable society. And it's not that everybody must have the same. That's not the point. But that those who have much, can be generous and distribute to those who do not have too much. When it comes to matters of food and little things like that, for other people, it's not a little thing, it's a mountain. They don't know where the next meal will come from. And maybe God has so blessed you over the years, the last time you prayed for your next meal, you can't even remember. Because it's no longer an issue for you. God has provided. And as he provides for you, please remember those for whom that is a current struggle. And reach out to them in love and in kindness and give to them. If you don't want them to know that it is you giving, give anonymously. Your pastors are here. Come and say, I prayed with some people. I know this is a need that exists. Anytime you have a need like that, or a child is not able to go through school because of school fees, please tell me. And then I can make available those resources. And it's a great blessing when you do that. And you will not have less, by the way. And let me just say that there are many of us who, that would be an easy calling. You live out the gospel in many different ways, but one of them is in what we do as a community with the poor. And more so, those who are of our own families. I want us to think about those. Don't even think about don't think about the general ones out there. Think of those that you're related with, by flesh and blood as a beginning. Then think about those that you're related with because they're part of the family of God. And as you give to them, you honor God, and God is pleased with what we're doing. So then, these laws were instituted by God for the purposes of dignifying the community of faith, the people who bear the name of God, that nobody should ever be degraded in their own eyes or in the eyes of others just because of want. And God said, I will give you enough so that if you share it out, then the people of God can receive honor. And others looking at this community of faith can admire it in the way that we live and in the way that we dignify one another. So then, so she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. I like this, happened to. Here is where now divine guidance meets human responsibility. She steps out by faith. She doesn't know. She says, I'll go and glean in whichever field, wherever I find favor. As she steps out, God's divine guidance leads her to the farm of Elimelech. So both are working in tandem together. So human responsibility does not negate the transcendence of God or the guidance of his hand. Both work together. But God needs us to initiate the action, saying that I trust you so much, God, that I will go there and see where your hand will lead me. This is Ruth's very strong point. So she happens to go here, and behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. Again, the timing also belongs to God. At the point that she comes into the field and is gleaning, Boaz will come along. He's the wealthy landowner. The Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless you. This is the time of the judges, where, faith has really, really slackened in Israel. Everybody does what is fit in their own eyes. There's a general backsliding of the community of faith. But God focuses us to this particular family where God is obviously not lacking, where he's known, and where people are actually practicing. So that even in a dark environment, even in a place where faith seems to have failed, God always has a remnant. And you can choose to be that one who says, I don't care what the rest of the world is doing. I know my God. I know what he has told me to do. I will be faithful and I'll do what is right. So even his greetings, the Lord bless you. The Lord be with you. He's very connected to God, and no wonder he's being called a man of worth. Not just in terms of what he owns, but in terms of who he is. And we can be men of worth by choosing to be that. So he comes and greets them, and they answered, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his young man, who was in charge of the reapers, this is the supervisor, whose young woman is this? So he notices her immediately. It could be that she was very beautiful. It could be that because she's not a local, foreigners have a way of standing out because they look slightly different. It could be that because it's a village situation, he knows everybody else who's a reaper, but who is this new person who has come? So he asks, who is she? And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. So here is a supervisor. He's got many reapers, and there's this foreign girl who has come, and just within one morning, he has a testimony about her work ethic. There's something about her, you must agree, that stands out. How you engage in the environment and in the place that God has called you is really up to you, not up to God. God can lead you to the field where you can glean, you can decide to do a good job, a bad job, an average job, or an exceptional job. And those around you will testify about how you work. And this is what Ruth was. Her work ethic was excellent. Never mind that what she's doing is not dignified. Because when you're a gleaner, everybody knows you're poor. Everybody knows you're desperate. If you're a gleaner and a foreigner, it's even worse. If you're a gleaner and a foreigner and a widow, oh my goodness. But look, already strangers who she's never met are already testifying about her work ethic. So she's beginning to stand out. That's your responsibility, not God's. Then Boaz said to Ruth, now he's engaged her directly, and there's probably some time that has passed between this first conversation and what we're reading, by what we will learn later. Then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? Again, tells us something about the environment and the attitude of the people who were gleaning or harvesting to the gleaners. You see? So he has to overtly give a command, don't harass this girl, don't touch her. Meaning, it could have been a really dangerous thing for her to be doing in that time in Israel, again, the days of the judges. And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. So he wants to keep an eye on her. He wants her to be within a safe environment. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him. This is giving us a glimpse of her attitude. What kind of a human being is she? She's humble, you know, she's grateful, she thinks she's not deserving. And the way she prostrates herself before Boaz just shows how grateful she is for the opportunity that God is giving her. So she bows down to him and says, why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me since I'm a foreigner? Again, a bit of the attitude of the Israelites towards foreigners. Okay? But Boaz answered her. Now listen, the testimony has already gone out. All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me. So he did interrogate the guy a little bit longer to know, okay, tell me more. What else did she do? So it has been fully told me, and how you left your father and your mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So look at how far the testimony has gone of this woman. Even what she was doing in Moab has followed her, because God has her, his hands and his eyes on her, because she's special. She's given such a committal to her mother-in-law, and God is saying, wow, what a woman. And it's interesting, again, I want to say, having come from a Moabite, this scales her oath to many, many degrees high. Because even for the Israelites, they never made this kind of a commitment to God. Now she's making it to her mother-in-law. Let me tell you the actual position of Moabites in the eyes of God in those days. This comes from Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 3 and 8. God says this, no Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even to the 10th generation. So these are people who are completely excluded from the kingdom of God. The reason? For they did not come to meet you with bread and water on your way when you came out of Egypt. And they hired Balaam, the son of Beor, from Pethor in Aram Naharaim, to pronounce a curse on you. However, the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam, but turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loves you. Do not seek a treaty of friendship with them as long as you live. So there's no chance, no possibility that she can never be incorporated into the community of faith. I want you to understand what personal responsibility can do. That single-handedly, Ruth is going to change the narrative and cause God to change his mind about Moab. And she is going to redeem the name Moab in the tongues and in the eyes and in the face of Israel. That word Moabite will no longer be spoken with spite because of what one person has done. So don't ever say that you're just yourself, you can do nothing. Ruth, orphaned, foreigner, gleaner, without anything going for her, is going to change the narrative for an entire nation. So, Boaz is now reaching out to her and guiding and protecting her. And this is the divine hand of God working through Boaz to ensure that Ruth has a place because of who she has become. So she falls to her face, bows down, and Boaz gives a report of what he has heard. In verse 13, then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I'm not one of your servants. So Boaz, again, his character shining through. He's kind. He speaks gently. He knows how vulnerable she is. And so he does everything that he can to cushion her and to make her comfortable and to reassure her. If you are a reader of romance, you will see that a young, beautiful, hardworking, faithful foreign woman meets a worthy, wealthy, godly, kind man. You probably know where the story will end. At this time, no one has intentions, by the way, all right? But this is again to tell you, this is how God guides people, And Ruth in herself, in her diligence, in her integrity, in her hard work, is already an attractive young woman. Anybody would like a woman like that. And so she is already, in a sense, almost spoken for by virtue of who she is. She knows who she is. She carries herself well. She works hard. In a sense, sometimes in Christian counseling, we tell women who are looking to be married, what are you doing to prepare yourself to be that partner who will be, marriageable? So there's a part that God will not do for you. That's a part of human responsibility. Position yourself so that you are beautiful and attractive and desirable in the best possible way. All right? The man on this other side, he's a worthy man. He's a man of integrity. He's hardworking. He's going to be a good provider. Already you can see that. And so when the time comes and he's ever called upon to do his due diligence and duty, you can see the two will mash up to be a beautiful match even before God. So then, and at mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine." So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." So she's already found a lot of favor in Boaz's eyes. And he wants her to be looked after, and he wants to ensure that her gleaning is not laborious or is not frustrating or demeaning. Again, it tells you how societies are the same. The poor are treated a certain way, with disdain and with neglect and with dismissal. So he's saying, don't do that to her, all right? Intentionally even leave some sheaves so that she has something to glean. Don't frustrate her. So she finds favor. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Note, she continues to glean. She knows she has found favor with Boaz, but she's not going to take advantage of the favor that she has found. And since sasa, you and I are my boys, see, mnuachie kitu hapa nini, hii kazi nimefanya sana, nimechoka sasa. Order some of your trucks to take some, some grain to Made, because after all, she's your relative. She doesn't do that. After she's been fed and everything, she wakes up and she continues to glean until evening. Again, a testimony about her work ethic, a hardworking woman. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah. That's like maybe 20 liters of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. So she has not forgotten she has a mother-in-law to take care of, and she carries some food and ensures that her mom is fed. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today, and where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she comes back with this large harvest her mom wasn't expecting. Again, gleaners could even be chased from the fields by mean landowners and come with very little. But now she's come with a whole harvest, almost like, Allah, where did you get all this? May God bless the man who took notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law, with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." So the reputation of Boaz as a kind man is already known. And now that Naomi has fallen into misfortune, he's saying he still remembers to be generous to us. you know, even though he knows, you know, our people are dead and so on. So she's looking at the favor as a favor done to her late husband, Elimelech. And Naomi, okay, so Naomi also said to her, the man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. And Ruth the Moabite said, besides, he said to me, you shall keep close to my young men until they have finished all my harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted. Again, the environment is hostile to foreigners and to gleaners, the poor, the vulnerable. And so this is protection. She sees it as God's prevenient grace. So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Provision has been assured for the rest of the harvest, and it probably will take 2 or 3 months before that is over. And so they don't have to think about where will food come from, where is provision. God has already taken care of that through this man Boaz. What a beautiful story of God's provision and God's protection of his people. As you step out in faith, as you believe God for the future, don't just sit there. And when you're given a menial task to do not look down upon it. It's not the task, it's the attitude. Sometimes God will give you an intentionally menial task to examine what is the condition of your heart. And there are some people who will not do it because they'll consider it below them. You know, they'd rather stay like that. And God says, I don't like that attitude. Give me your best. Show me that you can be faithful in little. And if you're faithful in little, I can entrust you with much. Because God is not careless. He won't give you what you can't handle. But when you show him you can handle even the least of tasks, then he say, your heart is faithful. Therefore, I can trust you with an increase, and I will give you more, and I will give you more, until one day he says, now welcome to the kingdom of your Father, because you have shown yourself to be diligent. Very quickly, let me touch on something else that is important. Ruth and Boaz at the threshing floor. This is an interesting one that advances, and the story is moving from hopelessness to a glimmer of hope, and now the page is going to turn to something that is way more than what could have been anticipated. Here is the story. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Naomi's heart is a kind, loving heart. She's still thinking of her daughter-in-law, this poor girl from a foreign land. She followed me here. I have nothing to give her. So should I not seek rest? So she's thinking about the future. Is not Boaz our relative with whose women you are? See, he's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. Do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. She's a foreigner. And so these are instructions that are culturally bound. She has no possibility of understanding what this thing is all about. But she say, whatever you say, I will do. And again, we see a bit of Ruth and her submission to an older, higher authority to guide her into how to behave in this particular society. And this, perhaps as we read a text like this, the covering of the feet, this has to do with something interesting that she had spoken earlier. The man is our close relative. He is a redeemer. Now, the concept of a kingsman redeemer, again, it's one of those laws that had been instituted by a god to mitigate against abject poverty. The kingsman's redeemer was a close relative of the family who, for example, in case a family fell into dire poverty, like what the Elimelech family is facing right now, the closest relative had a responsibility to come in and buy out the property so that it may revert back to that family, and so that they would not be perpetually poor. It's how you prevent what the economists call it, the vicious cycle of poverty. But here is a law that you might want to hear about. It's called the levirate law. Levirate is from the Latin, meaning brother-in-law. The levirate law. Okay, it's found in Deuteronomy chapter 25, and God again instituted this to ensure that there will be no abject poverty in Israel. And this is what he says. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. So it's a law that preserves the family lineage of somebody who passes away without a child. Obviously, if there had been property bequeathed to this brother, then it means that the property remains with the widow, and her children perpetually. Again, it mitigates against abject poverty in a patriarchal society where property is owned by the men and not the women. So it was God's way of showing kindness to those vulnerable groups. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, so again, you will not be forced, okay? She shall go to the elders at the town gate and say, my husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me. Then the elders of his town shall summon him and talk to him. Note the place of elders. If he persists in saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go to him in the presence of the elders. She shall take off one of his sandals, spit on his face, and say, this is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line. That man's line shall be known in Israel as the family of the unsandaled. So it's a disgraceful thing to be done. And you carry the disgrace of having refused to carry on your brother's line. Obviously, in the case of Elimelech and Naomi, Elimelech dies. He has two sons, but the two sons also die. So in a sense, there's no one to marry Ruth. So in that instance, the Lord had provided another law, that one of the Kingsman Redeemer. So the closest male relative to the family head would then have the obligation and the responsibility to come and redeem the property, the land, and the widow, so that that family lineage will not die off. So the instructions that Ruth has given to, Naomi has given to Ruth is the customary formal request of coming to a kinsman redeemer during harvest season and lying at his feet. Again, when somebody is at your feet, it's a position of humility. And at his feet, when he wakes up, he will be told, spread your gown over me. In other words, I desire to come under your protection. So it's a formal request to redeem the property, to redeem the land, and if he was willing, to marry the widow so that the family line could be continued. And this is customary. So it's not, Naomi was not sending Ruth to go and seduce Boaz. That's not the idea. And again, it's customary. Again, in our context, it might look a bit confusing. But that was the formal way of asking the kinsman redeemer to rise up to responsibility and do the duty of a kinsman redeemer. By her being at his feet, she's saying, spread the corner of your garment over me. Let me come under covenant oath to you, and let me become yours. So it's a very formal request. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings, the same term, wings or garment. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you have asked. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now, it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, very good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until morning. That's how the transaction goes. But note, so it's a relationship of integrity both ways. Boaz has authority, has wealth. He can take advantage of this young girl. He doesn't. The girl also can say, hey, my times are hard. You know, I've paid my dues. This is a wealthy, it's called Mbaba. Eh? Let me do my thing, you know, and confuse the guy, you know, because after all, what is she looking for? She's looking for security. But such is his integrity that he says, by the way, I'm not even the closest relative. There's somebody else. So, and the right thing to do, I will go approach him. Let's ask him whether he will redeem you. If he will, well and good, because that's the right thing to do. If he won't, then I can come in and redeem you. So he's very diligent in following the law and what it needs to, how it needs to be done. Ruth, on the other side, is just obeying her mother-in-law. This is what mom said, so this is what I have done. So as a young woman, she has integrity. She has preserved herself well. She carries herself with such sweetness that she is a desirable woman to marry. And I think that's a challenge for our current culture, to know that, you know, we can model integrity, we can model purity, we can model godliness, even in a very dark society like this, in the days that the judges ruled. Okay? May the Lord bless you. We'll continue from there. I'm sorry we have overshot our time.